Main speaker tonight, Marko.
I'm Marko. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Marko.
Who was late? Who just said that late? Sit down. Thanks, NASA. Thank you, Patty, and good to see you, Dave. And very grateful to be here tonight. I got the East Coast feed of Sopranos, so I got it out of the way. You want to know who died? No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. It's pretty interesting, though. Anyways, so what's new with me? I'm sober today, only by the grace of God and the 12 steps of this program and the simple principles I follow and my little code of ethics that keep me sober. Happy birthday to the, I believe it was Jim, Joe, and Jean, 3 J's. Happy birthday. My sponsor told me we take cakes for the newcomers so they can see and witness that we actually do put 365 days at a time together, which is pretty awesome when you're new. I remember when I was new and I just couldn't believe, not drink for a year. It just sounded so overwhelming. I got sober on October 15th. Well, I didn't get sober on October 15th. I actually got sober on October 24th, but I tried on October 15th in 1991. And by the grace of God, I'll be celebrating 10 years this October. And I want to talk about that day. I actually want to talk about the 15th. It's funny when I pitch, different things come to mind. Sometimes I get kind of a point blank thing. Sometimes it's, all smokes and jokes. And for some reason, I've been drawn to talk about October 15th. It was about 10 days before I actually got sober. And I was at a buddy of mine's house, and I used to judge my days by when I woke up. When I opened my eyes and I looked at the ceiling or the wall next to me, if it was a friendly environment or an unfriendly environment. In a friendly environment was seeing a ceiling or the wall next to me of a place I knew, opposed to being outside in the gutter with people kicking me. And it's almost that simple, you know what I mean? It was either good or bad. And on the 15th, I remember rolling over and opening my eyes, and it was a bedroom ceiling, and I saw the wall next to me and a painting on it of my buddies, and I remembered I had passed out at his house and kind of sat up in bed and looked around to see if there was any victims next to me, and there wasn't. It wasn't one of those good nights. And I've also learned there's no victims, just volunteers, and I try to remind myself of that. As the fog kind of lifted and day started coming together, I remember sitting on the side of the bed and popping a Bud Light and drinking most of it and lighting up a joint and smoking about half of it, and I just put it down. And my buddy walked in the room and he said, "What's going on?" And I said, "I gotta go." He said, "Well, what's wrong? What's up?" And I said, I just gotta go. And I went home that day and pondered for the first time in my life on suicide, because I had just lost a really huge job. I was basically tarred and feathered and tossed out of town in the industry I was in at the time. And I felt like I had absolutely nowhere to go. I had a 10-month-old baby. I had a marriage that was on the rocks. I didn't know what was left, and to me, as an alcoholic, what we do is we either get loaded or we kill ourselves or we get thrown in jail or an institution, and I had no reason to go to jail or check in anywhere, and to me, the easy way out was suicide. And I remember going home that afternoon, sitting on the couch and planning out my suicide. How I was going to get a revolver, I was going to go in the garage and leave a note on the table for my wife to find when she came home and just blow the back of my head off in the garage so I didn't make a mess in the house. I mean, I was that kind of, I guess, tidy about my suicide. At least that's where my head was going, on the back of the wall. And in that hour or two of sitting there and pondering this and trying to get the nerve up, I got like a hot flash. I just got real scared inside. And something inside me said, you coward, you know, you cannot do this. You know, how can you leave a 10-month-old daughter to grow up in this world and have to defend your character in school and in the workplace and out in public every day, you know? You know, I mean, that's what hit me. That's where I went with my illness at the time. You know, and I believe it was a blind intervention. You know, I believe the spirit of my God, as I believe him or her, was talking to me. And I just sat there and broke down and just realized that wasn't my choice. And the very next morning I woke up and I got a phone call, and it was a friend of mine from back east, Tim C., who I had known for many years. And he basically just said, how you doing? And I told him, I said, I'm a mess. And I knew he was sober. And he said, why don't you think about the program? He says, I've got a good friend, Bob T., who I can have him give you a call and you can talk to him. And he says, there's a great place back in Tucson. You can go check in, get away for a month, get away from the press, and just deal with these issues. It sounded pretty good to me at the time. It sounded real good. So Bob T. called me, my little Eskimo, and who I more affectionately call him the Nook when I'm in a good mood. And he's in a mood to listen. Basically he poured me into a plane and sent me off to Tucson. And I went away for 35 days. And I think that's the only reason I'm here today. Because I really believe if I realized I was an alcoholic and someone said, get down the street, there's AA meetings here, go ahead, I'd go to one maybe, I might go to two, but there's no way I would have stuck around. I mean, I really believe that. I had to go away, I had to get removed, I had to get into a place where I couldn't get away, and I had to get the message pushed at me, you know, and at that point in time I was very willing to listen. My friend Tim from Boston had sent me a letter and he said, I want you to open it when you get there, and when I checked in, and you went through the metal detectors, and you know they take you know your combs and everything but your toothbrush away because you might kill yourself, and your belts, and I was like trying to figure out, how am I going to kill myself with a comb? Am I going to like comb myself to death? You know, just like kind of dig it into my scalp till I bleed to death, and it's like they left you with nothing basically but a toothbrush. And anyways, I didn't brush myself to death. And in that letter, you know, when I checked in and got into my little bungalow there, I opened the letter, and it basically said, you have a chance to change your life in the next 35 days, you know, and I highly suggest you just sit up and listen and pay attention and get ready for a whole brand new way of life, you know. And believe me, I'm an alcoholic just like all of you. You know, I drank and drugged till it didn't work, you know, and I don't know why I took that phone call that day and I got the message and I heard what he had to say, and then I dealt with Bob T. the next day, and why I was sitting there in treatment center for 35 days, and I was ready to get away from the back of the bus and sitting in the back of the class and get up front and sit there and listen and pay attention. And it was an awesome experience. It was truly amazing. I remember the first night, you know, we were out in Sierra Tucson is at the base of the Tucson Mountains, and being there in late fall, early winter, it was, you know, all the colors are changing because it's all desert and everything was purple in the mountains. It was really beautiful, really spectacular. And at night, around 9 o'clock, the coyotes and the wolves sound off, and it sounded like I thought it was fucking Indians. I don't know what else to tell you. I thought it was screaming Indians coming down to kill us. I ran into the family center. I was like, what's going on? And they're going, it's the coyotes. Go to bed. You know, and I had no idea. I really didn't. It was really, really weird. And, you know, I got over that. And, you know, there were a bunch of lessons learned while I was there. But it was a real magical time because there were some really neat places to go there. There were these serenity walks and these paths where people had written things on stones and left them behind, and you know they had just really cool things, and I guess ultimately I paid attention. I got it. I came back with just a belly full of AA and raring to go, and I got home, and I got home on November 25th, which is my natal birthday, and I remember sitting at home and looking at my wife and going, well, this is a great way to spend my birthday. You know, and she said, so what are you going to do? You're going to go to an AA meeting? I said, yeah, well, I can go to one tomorrow. Yeah, it's my birthday. And she goes, hey, you said you're going to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. What happened? So I said, all right, fine. There was a meeting right across the street in the church. So I went out, got my car, took off, drove up to the coffee shop, got a coffee, and drove back down and drove around the church about 5, 6 times. Finally pulled in the parking lot, which I could have walked across the street to, you know. And I remember walking in that meeting, and it was an old-timers meeting. There was like 12 people there, and the person with the youngest sobriety was like 11 years. And I remember walking in, sitting down there. It's just like Alice in Wonderland, you know, where the door keeps getting smaller and smaller, and I'm going, it's like the meeting's going to start in 1 minute. I can still make it out the door. And this old timer hands me how it works, and he goes, why don't you read this, Sonny? So I was like, okay, great. So now I'm not leaving, I'm staying, you know. And it was just an incredible meeting, you know, because all these old timers just had great things to say. And at the beginning of the meeting, they said, so you knew, aren't you? And I was like, how'd you know? And then as I found out their sobriety time, it was kind of obvious, you know. So I was off, you know, 90 meetings in 90 days. That was my first meeting. And the following Monday, 2 days later, I went to the local Brentwood Monday night men's stag upstairs on San Vicente, which was my home group for my first, I guess my first 4 or 5 years. And I remember getting up there and sitting down, and they asked at the beginning of the meeting, if anyone had under 30 days, please raise your hand, state your name and disease. And all these guys are raising their hand, and I sat on both of mine, and I didn't want to be seen in the room. I just went back to my old behavior. And, you know, it's so funny as all these people, you know, qualified, and at the coffee break, I saw the people running up and hugging them and giving them cards and saying, let's go out for coffee. And I realized once again, I was going back to the old me, you know. And, you know, that next Monday night I was at that meeting, and they, you know, when they said, is there anyone, my hand was up in the air. I couldn't wait just to say I was new. And I made a lot of friends that night, and that was really where I found my sponsor. I found, like I said, it was my home group. I found a clan of guys I could relate to, talk to anytime, go out for coffee and dinner afterwards, and just really get centered, you know. And it's funny how we pick meetings, you know, and every once in a while, every couple of years, I'll just stop going to my regular meetings and I'll search out new meetings and just kind of change it up, you know. And that's the luxury of this program. I was talking to a good buddy of mine who's 2.5 years sober, and he's never been to a mixed meeting. You know, and I said, man, you're missing out on so much, so many speaker meetings and so many different things. And, you know, and it's like, I don't want to limit myself in this program. I want to check it all out, you know. I'm going to have a great luxury of getting on a plane Tuesday and flying up to Boston and go to East Dorset, Vermont, and go to Bill Wilson's house for a step retreat that I do every May. You know, and it says in the big book that we should do a yearly house cleaning, which is basically your 4th and 5th step. And the great thing is we go through all 12 steps over the weekend, and it's a spiritual high because there's about 15 of us guys. And, you know, when we do the 3rd step, we go to Bill and Lois's grave, and we do a 3rd step prayer and meditation that's really powerful. And it's great because there's a bowl of chips there that people from all over the world leave chips there. And, you know, I always grab 1 or 2 for some of my sponsees on whatever years it might say. There's always some great slogans. There's usually a hash pipe or a couple of weird things in there too. You know, who knows, you know. But I always like to bring a bunch of AA goodies to throw in the bowl. And, you know, I do my 4th and 5th step up in the room where Bill was born, this little tiny room with a little single bed and a rocking chair in it. And we do the 11th step in this babbling brook that's a few blocks up behind the house. And, you know, if you ever get interested to go, I'd be more than willing to share information with you. And Peter, my friend, is going also with me. We go every year, and it's just amazing, you know. And I don't think about going on AA retreats much, but, you know, if you've never done one, whether it's up the street or across the country or wherever, I mean, they really help connect you in this program, I've found in my experience. And, you know, it's great because it's a bed and breakfast, Bill's house now. So anyone can go there and check in and get a room if the rooms are available. And they have meetings in the back of the house in this big old den, this kind of function room. And it's always great because afterwards you go out in the rocking chairs on the front porch, sit there, and some of the old timers will hang out that grew up or spent time with Bill or Lois or Bob and share stories with you. And it's, I mean, it just doesn't get any better. I mean, to me, that is like the ultimate high of my year. I look forward to it every year, you know, and conventions in my business come up. They come and go around this time, and nothing's going to get in the way of that. It's just too important in my program. And, you know, once again, these are some of the little gems when we put time together that we suss out and find. I think I was about 4 years sober when I heard about this, you know. And like I said, it's a yearly tradition. And, you know, I'd have it no other way. You know, I drank and I drugged till it didn't work anymore. And back in '79, I used to fly to Houston, Texas, because I knew a guy who had a laboratory and was making ecstasy. And it was before it hit the streets, and this shit was unbelievable. I am so glad I did it. I did it nonstop for 10 years. You know, I was running a record company, and I remember one morning after a Wednesday morning 10:30 marketing meeting, I'd walk in the meeting and I'd sit down and go, "Good morning, everybody. What are we going to do great and creative today?" And I'd sit there and I'd run the show. And at the end of the meeting, the president called me up to his office and he goes, "Someone said you're on ecstasy?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Don't do that anymore." You know, and I was like, "Why? Man, I'm going. I got it all. No, don't worry about it, you know." Well, that was about 2 years before I hit my bottom. But, you know, when I look back, you know, what it used to be like, it was great. It was awesome. I had a blast. I had a blast at everything I did, drinking-wise, you know, cheating, finagling, whatever I did. I had major fun with it. And what happened is, about 2.5 years before I got sober, my wife said to me at the time, "You need to check into a program. You need to really look at your drinking." And I said, "Okay." And I remember I went over to, I was living in Studio City at the time, and I went into the Reseda area, and I went to this church basement. And I wish I could remember which church basement it was, because I've tried to find it and I haven't, but it tells me how blurred my vision was at that time in my thinking, because I probably sat in the same church basement a million times at meetings and I haven't put it together. It was the same room. But all I remember seeing is a bunch of people smoking cigarettes and drinking black coffee and looking really burnt out. And I was just like, this ain't me. I'm not this bad, you know. And I think we all go through that at first when we fight this program. Anyways, for 2.5 years, I became what they call, what do they call it? Asshole? No. That too. I was a periodic drunk. And I made a promise to my wife at the time that she would never see me drunk again, so she didn't. I didn't drink at home. I didn't drink at the office. I didn't drink in Los Angeles. I was Club Soda Johnny for 2.5 years. But I traveled a lot, and I literally would plan every one of my road trips. They usually were 4 or 5 day trips that I would take one day in the middle and get drunk and have 1 or 2 days to sober up before I came home. And I did that for 2.5 years, and I remember at the end of it, I remember getting out of the limo in front of my house on a hot afternoon and grabbing my luggage and walking up to the front door and knocking on the door, and as my wife opened the door, this waft of Jägermeister just went right into the house, and she just slammed the door, like don't even come in. And I went down to a buddy's house for a day or two and just kind of dried out and tried to get my act together and begged and sniffled my way back into the house, you know. And that was, I had quit drinking 2 days before I came home. But I was just that poisoned by alcohol. It sat in me. And I had a great routine, because I'd go out and do my business, you know, and take clients out and hit a club till about 10 or 11. Somewhere around midnight, I would just kind of go, you know, I got to go now. And I would find these, you know, like, no, they call them raves now, but I'd find these parties that were at, like, old mechanic sheds that someone would wheel in a stereo and a little portable bar would open up, and for $5 you get half a hit of ecstasy and you're in, you know. And I'd get that half a hit and I'd go out a back door, come back up, and come through a few times, just so I had enough, you know. And notoriously, from what I can remember, somewhere between 3 and 4 a.m., I'd be dancing by myself in the corner like when we used to go to festivals and that idiot tripping, spinning in the corner. You'd always go, whoa, they'd just throw the net on her or him, you know. And that was me, you know, and I'll never forget being at this convention in New Orleans a bunch of years ago. And I was out with my whole staff, and we got back to the hotel around 1:32, and everyone's loaded. We were drinking those Hurricanes, like those big fucking red drinks, and I drank about 8 of those. It was great because they were so sweet. You just keep chugging them. And we got back to the hotel, and everyone's like, oh, go in our room. We got an 8 o'clock meeting in the morning. I said, all right, kids, I'll see you later. I got to go work now. And I turned around and walked, and I remember going down the French Quarter, and, oh, man, I had to be nuts. I would go in these gay, biker, tattooed sailor bars where they'd just kill me looking at me, and I'd go in and, like, drinks for everyone, you know, and, you know, pour the booze down the bar, light it up, and dance on it, and just do stupid ass things that if I saw someone do today, I'd hate that guy. You know, like the biggest idiot, Boo-Boo the Fool. Like, what are you thinking? Kill that guy. You know, and that's the stuff I did, though. You know, I had this Superman complex. You know, when I went out and drank, I was like, I dare you. You know, I would just do anything crazy. You know, I remember being with my wife in Paris on Christmas Eve. We went out and saw a play, and we came back to the hotel, and we had a couple of drinks at a bar, a couple of gin and tonics. She said, I'm not feeling good. I want to go back to the room. And it was about 9:30, 9:45. We got to the room, and she said, I got to lay down. I said, well, I got to get a drink. I got to go out. I won't be long. And I grabbed $25, put it in my pocket. It was one of these cheap hotels. When I walked out, I locked the door from the hallway, which I locked her in. And it's one of these hotels that there was the bathroom down the end of the hall that you shared. So here it is, 9:45, Boo-Boo the Fool going out for one drink. And I remember going to this club and starting to put the drinks down, and there was a show happening next door, and I went over, and I was the big American record company guy, and I remember going, hey, here's my business card. I work with Warner Brothers. I'm going to come in and see this band now. And they went, well, hold on, you know, we got to get cleared. And long story short, in about 10 minutes, I pissed all the people off so bad for being so. They physically threw me out in the street and said, don't come back. And I was like, I couldn't believe it, you know. And I went back in the bar next door and drank on and drank on. Long story short, at 7 o'clock the next morning, I woke up, as I had many other times, in one of those unfriendly situations where I was laying in, you know, as the streets, there's always those basement apartments, the stairs go down off the street, and I was laying at the bottom of it, all rolled up next to this ash can, and my leather jacket was ripped, and I kind of got up and kind of try to reorient myself to the situation. I'm walking down these streets, and it's all these old Parisian buildings, and I don't know where I am. And I'm walking, and all of a sudden I hear my name yelled, Marko! And as I turn the corner, my wife is hanging out the window going, hey! And it's like, oh, cool. So I get up to the room, and I find the key, and I unlock the door, and she almost knocks me out of the way, running to the bathroom, you know. And a few minutes later, she comes back. She goes, what are you thinking? And I was like, I don't know. She goes, what happened? I said, I don't know. I said, let me think about it. I'm reaching my pockets. I pulled out about $250. I still, to this day, don't know where the money came from, but I surely didn't earn it. You know. I got a sneaky feeling that I challenged everyone in this bar to a bet of something really insane I was going to do, and the money was up there, and I grabbed it and ran, because that's the stuff I did. I believe that, I do. $250. But that's the kind of drinker I was, and you know, and like I said, it was fun for a long time. But in those blackouts at the end, I remembered less and less. And that morning on October 15th, when I drank that, I'll never forget, I drank the Bud Light and smoked half a joint. My buddy looked at me and goes, aren't you going to finish the joint? And I was like, nah. And I knew the jig was up. You know, I knew I was done. I was toast. There was something coming and something good, but I didn't know where and when and how. But I was up for grabs, you know, and you know, suicide was an option, but I couldn't do it, you know. And my daughter gives me cakes every year when I celebrate a birthday. And, you know, I had a men's step study at my house in Santa Monica for about 4.5 years. And I still hear guys get up and take cakes and thank me for the meeting I had, that they came into my living room and I opened my house up to guys. And it started off with 3 of us. And I called my sponsor after about 2 months, and I said, Rick, am I doing the wrong thing here? And he goes, well, what are you doing this for yourself? And I said, well, I know a lot of guys I've met at meetings that don't go to step studies, and I thought I'd start one. You know, and I'm one of these guys, I believe it is in the book, it's not a meeting, but I wanted to try it anyways. And, you know, within a year, we ended up with 20, 30 guys, and 2 years in, there was 50 guys, and 3 years in, there was 60 guys every week plus. And, you know, it was just the funny behavior of newcomers. You know, I had in this guest house I lived in, I had Berber carpet, which is that real off-white, sandy, nice, pretty wool carpet through the whole living room. And I had one of those giant urn coffee makers in the kitchen, and the newcomers come up and they'd be filling their cup, and I go, hey, how you doing? They go, I'm doing fine, I'm doing fine, I'm doing great. And I said, you know, there's plenty of coffee, you don't have to fill it. And they'd fill it right to the brim, right to the edge. You know, and I'd see them walking across my living room like a dog shivering and shaking and shitting glass, you know, like there's plenty of coffee. And, you know, at the end of the night, I have a couple of guys that always come around, and we'd be toweling up the coffee drips everywhere. And, you know, and that was a house I loved, and I was like Felix Unger. I was wicked anal. You know, I was really at the cleanliness. I had this $10,000 beautiful white, huge formation couch. And, you know, after about 2 years of the meeting, everything was ruined. And you know what? I could have given a shit, because that didn't mean anything to me anymore. You know, it really didn't. And that's so not me. You know, and it sounds trite. It's like, you know, who cares about your couch guy? But, I mean, the things that I believed in and my behavior, where I came from, and the things that I learned to love, I guess, you know, all that stuff didn't matter anymore. You know, I look so much forward to those newcomers and spilling coffee on my carpet every week, you know, and the miracles I would see happen in my living room, you know, just exercise those demons every week out of my, you know. And once again, I looked for things to keep myself from not going out, you know, and I love my time. I use my time a lot. I don't want to lose these almost 10 years. You know, I don't want to have to start over. If I do, I will, though. But I don't want to, and, you know, I try to find things to use. I don't want my daughter to see me drunk. She's never seen me drunk. That's a huge one for me, you know. And when I was having that step study, I couldn't imagine 60 guys coming into my parlor when I'm sitting there, you know, with the windows duct taped with the blinds, and you know, I got the pipe out, and I'm like low crawling and peeking, and Marko, we know you're in there. You know, I mean, there's no way, you know. So I mean, you know, I found reasons to stay sober. You know, you know, whatever it takes. You know, whatever it takes. And, you know, I had a 2-drink minimum, you know, in my drinking. You know, the first drink got me even, the second drink got me superior, you know, and I felt better than all the time. It was one to get even and one to become superior, you know, and it's these things that we learn about ourselves in this program. And, you know, Wayne touched on it about, you know, any time when I get into the driver's seat, it screws up. You know, when I reach out, when I have a bad day or things aren't going my way, I pick the phone up and I call a newcomer. You know, I talk to the guys I sponsor. You know, I go to a meeting. I call my sponsor. You know, I just went through a thing with my sponsor. I did 90 calls in 90 days. And what that's about is I've always prided myself calling my sponsor every day. And I don't know, about 4 months ago, he said to me, yeah, I haven't heard from you in almost a week, and I almost died. It was like, me with my great program? How did I do that? So I just made a commitment to do 90 calls in 90 days, and it's probably been about 150 days now, so I'm not keeping score anymore, but it got me back to it. And I've been also extremely fortunate to have the same sponsor I met when I first got sober. And I can't imagine bouncing sponsors around, and people do it, you know? People slip, too. But this sponsor's been there for me, and I remember like it was yesterday when I lost my job and I was sitting at home, and it was right before, 2-3 days before I went away to treatment, and I knew it was coming, and I was looking forward to it. But I had film crews out in front of my house with Diane Sawyer jumping out of a van. It was like, Mister, is it true? And all that kind of shit going on in my life. And it was crazy. It was crazy what was happening to me there. And I called my sponsor. I said, Rick, you can't believe what's going on. I mean, I can't walk out of my house. I can't do this and that. And I'm not going away for a couple more days. And he said, well, let me ask you something. Did you have a drink today? And I said, no. And he went, life's good, isn't it? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, just think if you drank. You know, where would that take you? You'd probably be out beating up the van driver now, you know? And he's right, and he was right, and he's still right today, you know. And if you don't have a sponsor, I would extremely highly recommend you get one. And they say look for the similarities, or look for something, go to a meeting that you feel real comfortable in, and see the guys or girls, ladies, you know, that you look up to in that meeting. And my sponsor Rick at the time had a literature commitment at this meeting, and when they said, and Rick on literature, the whole room, all these 120 guys are like, Rick, and he's this old salt, and this guy gets up and goes, yeah, I got a big book, if you have the money, I'll turn my back, you can steal it, and whatever, don't worry about it, and glad you're here, keep coming back. And you know, when I saw a bunch of guys hanging around him afterwards, and I thought, this is the guy I want to sponsor me, and I went up to him and I said, Rick, would you mind being my temporary sponsor? And he laughed, and I said, what's so funny? And he goes, well, nothing, I'll tell you later. And, you know, I guess about 3 months after that, I said to him, so I guess you're my full-time sponsor now. And he goes, that's why I was laughing. He goes, you know, I'll sponsor you. He goes, they told you in treatment, ask for a temporary sponsor, I'll be a temporary sponsor. But, you know, sponsors are there to listen to the new and listen to us. You know, and it amazed me, because I used to say to him, I say, Rick, you know, it's amazing how much you listen to my shit, how much I bent your rear with my garbage, and you just listened and said, you know, keep coming back, and have you drank today? Then it's a good day. And I just listened and listened, and he turned to me, he says, I don't know how the hell you stayed sober your first year. He says, because if I was you, there's no way I would have. He goes, do you know what you went through? And I was like, well, and he brought me up to speed and up to snuff, and he told me, he goes, man, you work an unbelievable program. I'm so glad you're sober today. And you know, I've got a great relationship there with him. And my wife had 7 years. She went out to have a beer, and 2 years later came back and honestly thought she was going out to have a beer. She was out with a boyfriend, had 7 years sober, was sitting in a bar in Boston, and he ordered a beer because he was a normie, and she said, you know what, I'm going to have one tonight. 2 years later came back in the program on her knees, a wreck. And she'll celebrate 7 years this summer. And I see miracles all the time. You know, a lot of people went out last night, Cinco de Mayo. You know, I know Peter and I were talking on the way over here. I know a few people went out last night. You know, it happens. I took went to my wife's, they had a rap party last night. She runs a TV show, and you know, it was Cinco de Mayo style party. And in the back, they had a table where they were rolling cigars, you know, handmade cigars, and it was a happening party. It was really cool. And in the back, they had a couple of guys dressed as, well, the Mexican guys dressed as Mexicans, but they had these. It's cool. They had these 2 giant blocks of ice, and they were making margaritas, and they'd fill your glass up with ice, and you'd stick it inside this block, and they'd pour the stuff in, and you'd see it go through the block, and so you got this ice-cold drink. And I said to him, I said, my wife and I, do you make non-alcohol margaritas? To the guy on the left. And he goes, yeah. I said, make one for my wife. And I looked at the guy on the right, I said, make one for me too. And he goes, sure. So they made them both, and my wife and I took a sip, and I went, whoa. I said, there's no alcohol in this, right? And he went, yeah. I said, is there alcohol in this? And he went, yeah. I said, no alcohol. And he goes, oh, sorry. I said, yeah, I'm allergic. And the guy looks at me, he goes, yeah. I said, yeah, I'm allergic. I said, every time I drink, I break out in handcuffs. And he goes, oh. And, you know, people kill me, man. They don't know how to deal with us. They just don't get it. They're just like, they think we're like Martians or something. You know, and it's true, because just think the damage we could do if we just left this meeting now, found a friendly bar, and started drinking. I'll tell you what would happen. For about 20 minutes, we'd be going, wow, you know, and then, you know, 20 minutes after that, it would be like, oh, Jesus. And 20 minutes after that, we'd all be dead but one person, the survivor, whoever it would be, because we just kill each other. You know, you'd think we'd like go home and go, wow, that was a blast. No way. It doesn't work that way. You know, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we come to learn this. We come to learn this about ourselves. I have no question. I can't go out and drink again. I mean, If any of you have any doubt and you think you can do it again, tell me the next guy that comes up and speaks and says, yeah, I went out there and it was pretty damn good. You know, I've never once heard it in my 10-odd years, you know. You don't hear it, you know. And this program is a miracle. You know, this is a room full of losers at one time, and now it's a room full of winners, you know, because we stick around, we stay for the miracle. You know, we work this program. You know, this is $1 million program shoved up our ass a nickel at a time, and bring it on, man. Thanks for letting me speak.